I'll be today reading you the third chapter of the book A Mirror to the Blind by Maulana Abdus Sattar Edhi. I've received some feedback on my reading skills. I've been told that I don't look at the camera. I look down when I read. Is there any other way to read? So, I mean, if the camera is, if I have a teleprompter or something, yes, indeed, I can do that, but I don't have any. So I have to read from a book, and the book is here. I can put the book here and then read. Is that really fun? I don't know. Another feedback that I've been given is that I yawn a lot. Now I have two issues. I have something called hiatus hernia, and I have disc bulges in my cervical spine, including C3, C4. I don't want to go into details, but it's not good news. Bottom line is, certain things you have to just live with, and yawning properly is one of those things. It's not that Edhi makes me yawn. Whatever I read, or even if I don't do anything, I still need to yawn. So yawn. Now, the third thing that I was told was that I read too fast. I'm a visual person. If any one of you has read NLP, you would probably know audio visual kinesthetic. So, as a visual person, I tend to speak fast. But I've taken this feedback in my stride, and I'll try and see how much of it I could address today. Chapter 3. We went through chapter 1, which was sort of introduction. It was more about Bilal, his grandson, Edhi's grandson, and how he, despite personal tragedy, keeps on doing the good work. The second chapter was more about his family and his humble beginnings, the teachings on humanitarianism that he got from his mother and father. Now there's chapter 3. Now another thing, I was told that I could be a good voice artist. I don't want to be a voice artist. I have no such ambitions. I'm just reading this book because I have to read this book. Why do I have to read this book? I like this book. And someone has advised me to read this book. Someone that I value and respect a lot. Perhaps the writer of this book. Perhaps. Who's the writer of this book? If you've seen chapter 1, you would know it. Right here, you could probably read it. Can you read it? Yeah, I think you can read it. Okay. And I may be imperfect. I may speak fast. I may yawn. I may look down as I read. All those things. But this book, the first edition of this book came in 1996. That's 20 years back. So in 20 years, nobody decided to audio type this book, read it out. At least give me that much credit. I don't care if I get 27 views or 2 views or 1 view. I'm not doing it for the views. There's only one view that I'm interested in, and well, that's about it. So bear with me if you want to not read the book and just hear somebody talk about it. Otherwise, just read the book. If you don't like my voice, just read the book, or make the effort yourself. Read it yourself. You could probably be a better voice artist than I am. I'm not a voice artist, as I said. Just an average guy. Problems with my accent, problems with my vocabulary. So there are better people than I am who could read it out in a more eloquent, articulate manner. So I'll just keep on. Chapter 3. Pakistan had a fresh ambience. Centuries-old landscapes and decrepit buildings seemed to rejuvenate. There was hope in the new and separate identity of the nation. Hope that accompanies all beginnings, but delusions and dreams dissipated when the bus we were on halted with a jolt. The dilapidated buildings we occupied in Malir on the outskirts of Karachi was allocated to Memon immigrants by an agreement between community elders and the Pakistan government. It was adjacent to a newly constructed Hindu temple, standing desolate and forlorn in the midst of congestion. The comparison between this and Bantua was such that even I, as an Edhi, who never looked for beautiful surroundings was disturbed. Memories of open spaces and fresh air made me homesick. The building soon had every ingredient of a refugee camp. Tin trunks of different sizes, decorated with fading hand-painted motifs. Big bundles containing old clothes, utensils, and other belongings tied in white sheets, held together by tight knots. Tiffin carriers, old dolls, squealing and wailing children, confused and uprooted women. And anxious men crowded the corridors. My own parents quietly settled into the small room we were provided, where my mother, in accordance with the belief that lighting a kitchen fire was life-generating, immediately organized the cooking area. Simultaneously, an urgent race for free property commenced. Hindus had fled to India, abandoning their properties, and immigrants greedily clamored and trampled over one another to take possession of the vacuum property. My father disapproved this manner of illegal possession. He would not concede to his friend's suggestions that he acquire anything by this method, and said firmly, "We should labor and struggle towards building a spirit of nationalism, or have we come here as dacoits?" He was already feeling disappointed, and the selfish attitude of people made him say, "What a mess." We rented a small room in a tall building in Chaba Gully next to Jodia Bazaar. Having disposed of the iron safe and cupboard in Bantwa, we moved in with our new possessions. Our new home was near the city court. Adjoining it was the notorious Red Light District, Napier Road, from which many shortcuts sprung and led to the city's wholesale market and bazaars. The first textile industry was jointly funded by the government of Pakistan and the Walika family. Huge concessions were extended to those with little cash, but some experience. I considered this scheme, but rejected the idea when my father said, "Understand business from the alphabet A. Begin from the bottom, because you will never come back to learn from the top." Interesting. Father accepted employment as a commission agent in a shop behind our home. Sometimes I helped him, but mostly I loitered around the streets, curiously examining and comparing the differences to Bantwa. Maiman initiatives were soon apparent. The city was buzzing with activity. Shops opened despite shortage of wares, and a cloth market was activated. Ration stores, haggling customers, sweetmeat corners, and meat sellers also suddenly appeared. Hurriedly constructed plywood stalls sprouted on the footpaths of crowded streets, displaying second-hand clothes, cut-piece fabric, and a variety of homemade pickles. Little mobile carts pushed through congested dirt paths, halted every few furlongs, and sold blocks of ice, or sweetened fruit essence diluted with chilled water, or sliced fruit spice with salt, pepper, and many different spices. Over it, hordes of black flies swarmed, and service was simultaneously conducted with one hand, constantly occupied in waving them away. Food vendors deftly scooped curried chickpeas into newspaper cones, while others tended to large basins of simmering oil, where sizzling pakoras and samosas fried. These are local delicacies of Pakistan and India, like fried dumplings, might say. Anything that could be, with corn flour apparently, anything that could be sold was in the market. The people of Bantwa hardly ever fought, at least not in the streets. But here, everyone was contentious. My father joked when I pointed this out. "Their nerves are bad like your mother's. They cannot adjust," he also explained. "We must adjust to them. Our way is exclusive to our own homes. Even that will change with an altered external environment." Pathans from the frontier province, Urdu-speaking people from Hyderabad, Deccan and Uttar Pradesh, Punjabis from East Punjab, and Bengalis from East Bengal had moved here. Yawn, creating a strange and uncoordinated fusion. I would sit all day on a platform in the bazaar and watch these different people. Often my mouth would fall open and my eyes would move from one side to the other at the strange amalgam of faces. One day my attention was captured by the intensity in the powerful eyes of a turbaned Pathan. They bored through the crowds and honed in on a passerby. Suddenly, like a ferocious tiger, he leapt. Before anyone could think, a knife flashed. A dead man lay in a pool of blood that spread down the street. People ran from all directions towards him, and I ran too. It was said that the Pathan recognized the man as a Sikh he had known in India. This was my first encounter with crime. Although I could understand personal enmity, I could not fathom what kind of man killed another only because he represented a people or a nation he disliked. I found no justification for even harassing fellow beings for such general reasons. The ungovernable temper of man, combined with a lethal weapon, draws another man's blood with such ease, I thought. I hated war and bloodshed, and wondered why it was so difficult to negotiate matters of dispute. The real war was to fight poverty, gain freedom and justice, not kill people. Surprisingly, that's how I think too. If you were to see a happyworld.info, these are the kind of things that I've been talking about, or rather blabbering about. There were so many issues to settle in Pakistan that examples of vengeance left unchecked would only further frustrations and divisions. I noticed people turning to illegal methods. My childhood dream was transformed into reality when my father gave me money for business. The boys from Bantwa laughed as I purchased pencils, matchboxes, and hand towels from the wholesale market. I excitedly arranged the wares in a small tray, hung the towels in my extended arms, and held the tray in front of me. Selecting a busy crossroad in the center of the bazaar, I stood stiffly, running uneasily from my base towards potential customers and back. With practice, I was able to align my movements with my wares, and then, no matter how fast I swept past bends, the goods tray with the towels on my arms remained straight and balanced. People in a hurry brushed me aside. Others irritably shooed me away for interrupting a better bargain. Some would stop, lift and examine a matchbox, slide it open, check the sticks, snap it shut, and declare, "No good." They would pick up a pencil, roll it between their fingers, hold it up, read the company name, and fling it back, frowning, "Useless." While they felt the towels and checked the brand name, mumbling about bad quality, I impatiently scanned the area in search of another party. As they walked away, unconscious of wasted time and lost possibilities, I ran to somebody else. Soon I became an expert at differentiating between customers and time wasters, and became selective. It was better for business. Happy at being able to fend for myself, I began to buy my meals from food stalls. My mother complained, "You are an independent man, 15 years now, but earning men have homes where they eat." She would tell me to avoid eating from the bazaar, where the quality of food was suspect. How do you know where the meat comes from, where it was cooked, and when? Have you not seen the flies that sit on it? I controlled my feelings of independence and returned home to eat with her and Aziz. Our mother had grown weak and psychologically unstable. I tried to help ease some of her burdens by sweeping and scrubbing the floors and washing her utensils under the tap outside the building. I cut, washed, and drained vegetables, and often cooked the meal for her. Each morning I tended to Aziz, who was 5 years younger than me. I left him at school and went street hawking. In the evening, he would wait for me to bring back something for him, and I often did. Our sister Zubaida lived with her husband and mother-in-law. Our mother visited her very seldom, and Zubaida came to our home even less. as it was neither expected nor traditionally recommended. My father and I had never been to her house. It's appalling. Here I'm speaking how women are treated, what stereotypes we have. So if a daughter gets married, the kind of stereotypes of fathers and brothers not visiting her, and if they must have something, substantial, something like an offering to a god or a demon with them for the in-laws. Because I spent nothing, I saved enough from my street selling venture to start a pawn shop. Pawn is beetle leaf. I rented a little mobile cart, parked it outside the building every night, and in the morning pushed it by its handles to the entrance of a crowded bazaar. To purchase beetle leaves, I made daily trips to the fruit and vegetable market, and this took up the entire morning. The smell of rotten fruit overwhelmed the fresh aroma rising from the stalls, and at every step the pulp of crushed vegetables was felt underfoot. Much as I tried to rush, it was impossible. I noticed how one unruly person created a group, a crowd, even a mob, when he haggled for bargains. They fought for reimbursements of a low-quality product bought the day before, pushed and shoved for priority service, waved their arms in the air from behind, angrily and incessantly demanded the shopkeeper's attention, accentuating the din. I would wait restlessly for just a little bundle of leaves. When at last I was heard, my small purchase was treated with uncaring haste, and I would usually have to compromise on quality. With experience, I learned that different tastes compared the prices, concluding that a better quality with a slightly raised selling price was viable. At the pawn shop, I mastered the art of creating something to sell at great speed. Unfolding the dampled white cloth, I snatched out a fresh green leaf, placed it flat across my palm, and swiftly stroked the liver-colored katha with a spatula on half the leaf. A scratch of sharp white chuna, chalk simmered in milk to reduce its cutting power, a pinch of aniseed, a hint of bright pink perfumed sugar, a few silvered cardamom seeds, malati, the wonder herb for the vocal cords, and small chunks of the heart nut called supari. That people of the subcontinent chew endlessly. Deftly, I would wrap up the pawn, insert a small clove to bind the contraption, and sell it. Apart from this creative work of 3 pounds a minute, there was not much to this shop. The meaningless chatter of waiting customers was of no value to me. They would tuck the pawn in the deep recesses of their gums, one on one side of their mouth, and be off. My father had saved most of his life's earnings. When his friends and associates would tell him to give me money so that I could do better than run a pawn shop, he would say, let him first learn how to work with money and understand its value. I wound up the pawn shop and sold cutlery and crockery instead. This was a large investment, but it was neither easy to sell nor interesting enough to sustain me. So I returned to my old passion of hawking and sold newspapers. In the mornings, I would get milk from the cow herds and deliver it to people's doors, consciously assimilating and appreciating lessons from the street. Bright colors boosted my energy and still attracted me. One day, I wore a green shirt and again accompanied my friend to the cinema. This time, the film was called Charak. Unlike the first film I saw in Ahmedabad, it was based on the partition of the subcontinent. But again, it failed to capture my imagination. I fidgeted, visibly irritated at my wasted time, while hundreds of people remained still and silent in the dark hall, absorbed by the imposition of somebody's mediocre ideas. When my mind rejected that matter again, I decided never to venture into a cinema hall. Curious to experience life away from home and enter the practical field, I accepted employment with a cloth merchant in Bahawal Nagar and divided a salary of 300 rupees per month between my parents and myself. Despite extreme homesickness, I continued to deliver cloth to shops in adjoining areas for 6 months. When I returned home, my mother was in poor health, and I decided to remain with her to look after Aziz and our home. Like my father, I became a commission agent. From the 300 rupee salary I received, I gave only 25 rupees to each of my parents and saved the rest. Aziz was doing well in school. Unlike me, he was interested in academics and dreamt of becoming a specialist in some field. He could not comprehend why I had wasted my life. What can one do without an education these days except become a small shopkeeper or a commission agent? His dreams were more ambitious than my own had been at his age. In fact, mine had not soared beyond sweet selling, and that had been done. So he was interested in religion. He would sometimes attempt to teach me and read the Quran. My father would return home late from work or else spend the entire evening with his friends. Sometimes I would join the group, sitting on a thin darri, like a small carpet, spread on the pavement. They would lean against a shuttered shop, drink tea, and discuss new commercial opportunities. When the men talked of religion, my father, as usual, snubbed them. Who knows enough to be able to comment accurately? In the year 1948, an advertisement in a newspaper informed the public of the first charitable organization in Meethadar. Meethadar means sweet water, I think. Senior Bantwa Memons made up its board and called it the Bantwa Memon Dispensary. I felt an excitement, as if at last I had fought the right vocation and volunteered. When the patrons approved 8 members for registration, I was the youngest. Elderly members were to participate only in committee meetings. Then members of the community asked my father, Haji Shakur, what are you contributing to charity? He replied, I have given more to charity than any work or money is worth. Pointing to me, he said very earnestly, I have donated a whole human being to it. Watch him. My father was now trying his hand in another economic venture. Small businessmen sold rice to the Sindh Rice Corporation, and the government issued them post-dated drafts. As people needed cash, my father would pay it and purchase the drafts at lower rates. Like my father, money-making fascinated me, for both of us. However, it was an interest wholly related to discovering lucrative investment schemes. I was soon able to establish a small source of income from share certificates, which enabled me to spend more time at the dispensary and less at making a living. In the day, I continued to work at the cloth shop. After the bazaar shut down, I worked at the dispensary. My ailing mother would still worry about me, questioning me incessantly as soon as I stepped through her door. Have you eaten? Ignoring my insistent affirmations, she would heat the food and make me eat again. Aziz would talk about things he learnt at school. He soon began to read out passages in English that neither our mother nor I understood. I was not satisfied with the isolated effort at the dispensary. In my opinion, different groups of Maimons would have established a joint venture that aimed to cover at least the entire community. Instead, they broke into small sects that catered exclusively to their own members. This form of service had many flaws and soon became an instrument of chilling injustice. Non-Maimons had to undergo hectic and long procedures to get free medicine. For me, this was absolutely unacceptable. Although my colleagues respected my efficiency and hard work, I was not appreciated for my views, and they turned cold towards me. That sounds familiar. It did not take me long to notice that those I had thought strong had weaknesses of character. Again, that doesn't sound familiar. That sounds rather familiar. Any doubts I might have had cleared when my mind confirmed that the operation was against the basic concept of charity. I decided to break oppressive rules, and many loud arguments ensued, to which I paid no heed. Silently, without questioning backgrounds, I checked prescriptions and gave out medicines to the poor, thereby cutting past procedural hassles that caused delay and hindrances in almost every little bit of good. I was soon reported to the elders in the committee for not adhering to the rules. It was my nature to speak when spoken to, respond in monosyllables, and avoid discussions and arguments. I was not just inarticulate, I had very little word power. But I tried to explain to the committee a simple principle. Humanitarian work loses its significance when you discriminate between the needy. prejudices evident in refusing medicine to the ill, whomsoever they might be. If this be our manner of charity, we should confine it to our homes. My youthful ideals caused an angry outburst. Not only had I overstepped, I had also shown unheard of disrespect to my elders, something that laymen are seldom confronted with. At the next committee meeting, I said, "What is the need of this gathering? Work is accomplished by doing it, not by talking about it." Again, sounds very familiar in terms of my views on meetings. The committee was quick to counter me with its own method of harassment. In this, they were supported by their bosses. It was an experience that subsequently gave me an insight of the working of the entire country. My contributions towards having established the dispensary was ignored, and my authority to sign applications was withdrawn by the office secretary. On the other hand, salaried workers offered free x-rays for small bribes. Volunteers openly took token money to enlist the needy for free sewing machines and eggs. The office staff went off duty after 5 hours, forcibly shutting the shop, whereas I was prepared to work throughout the night. When the saints who patronized the dispensary adjourned a charity function, I attended it as one of their employees. After the influentials finished speaking and praising each other's efforts, and much loud clapping with Zindabad slogans finally died out, I stood up from my seat in the audience and asked permission to say a few words. This caused surprise. I was a non-entity. My audacity to address rich and powerful elders from a position of insignificance released an immediate adverse reaction. The crowd leered. Agents of big bosses rose from amongst the public and hooted, "Who do you think you are? Sit down or we'll throw you out." Somebody from the crowd shouted, "Let the silly boy speak. Let's hear him." Somebody laughed. Somebody abused. I stepped out. Before me sat the men whom Muhammad Ali Jinnah had said were crucial to Pakistan's economic growth. I inhaled deeply. I told them about my idea of charity and vehemently denounced theirs. You paralyze widows and orphans with the little morsels you throw at them to indebt and enslave them forever. You never rehabilitate them. Your need to have these victims of circumstance crawl at your feet every month is an evil satisfaction. It is a hunger for the look of gratitude in eyes you fill with broken pride from your coffers. The crass occasions you celebrate with presentations of sewing machines and old clothes are merrily well attended, expensively catered shows for publicity. Personal advertisements, so that those who do not see you in your benevolent glory know you through the press. No respect can be achieved by these methods. It is not charity. It is not for God. Nor is it for the poor. In fact, it is merely a propaganda organ, a promotion program. Shoes, chairs, and sticks flew. The uproar brought me back to stark reality. They were insulting me, screaming for me to get off the stage. They had listened in silence. Why had they not stopped me then? Coming down from the platform, I looked towards my young Pantwa friends for support, but they averted their eyes. Sounds very familiar. I was bewildered, but not disgraced. My honor was not based on anybody's respect for me. It was based on truth. As I was of no value to the bosses, they ordered me out and warned me against ever entering the dispensary. My father supported my stand. It is wrong to silence youngsters when they confront the wrongdoings of their elders. Freedom of truth is essential for self-respect. Let them ask you to leave if they so wish. Of course, there was a fear of the community. I knew they could make my life hell and hinder anything I wished to do in the future. Their word was very powerful, and life did become hell. They made sure of that. I would walk down the street with Maiman boys hurling abuse at me. When I would greet an elder I had known practically all my life, he would turn his face and walk away. My father advised the only way to fight back is to ignore them. and the only way to win is to forge ahead against them. He explained, occupying you with their offensive will be the weapon they will use against you. It breaks the strength of rebellion, curtailing energy and diverting it towards provoked defenses. When I understood the psychology of the fast-building opposition that I had unleashed upon myself, I put the oppressor in a flux with my indifference and came to grips with my situation. My father made another suggestion. It is my experience that honest people should avoid taking favors and entering into partnerships. I imprinted this advice on my heart. In the year 1950, a family approached me with an unusual request. An old domestic servant who had been serving them for 50 years was now on his deathbed and wished to return to Bihar in India. They handed me 2 British Airways tickets and asked me to deliver the old man to his family at the coal mines. For me, travel was another dream realized. It also afforded me an opportunity to escape the mounting hostility. The medical certificate said my ward would live for 1 week, but he became unconscious during the flight and had to be carried off on a stretcher. At Calcutta airport, I hurriedly obtained the telephone number of the Red Cross, and the old man was rushed to the Islamic hospital in their ambulance. As there was no money for the ambulance fee, I gave my passport number to the angry driver. The old man, safe in hospital, I boarded a bus to Bihar, arrived at the family home and informed them of their relative condition. Accompanied by his brother, I returned to carry the dying man on my shoulders to another bus. Finally, he was home and expired a few hours later. It's a deeply moving book. It's not Sidney Sheldon. It's not Orhan Pamuk. It's none of those things. On my way back, I took the bus from Calcutta to East Pakistan, where my half-brother worked for a trading company. When he took me to view a grand mosque financed by the Memon community, I was sad rather than happy at the endeavor, and could not help point out the relevance of Hukukul Ibad. This is the first time that I'm reading this chapter, and this is something that I've been talking about for a long time, Hukukul Ibad. None amongst the Muslim community care about it. Amid so much poverty, when people are deprived of basic medical facilities, emphasis should be on rendering these services through mosques. As we were trained to keep to our own affairs, my brother was astonished at my blunt views. He warned me against a reaction. I warned him of a future rebellion against the concept and said, how do they expect God's blessing by minimizing and confining his message? I flew back to Karachi. Memon boys who had continued to associate with me had either lost their jobs or were forbidden employment in any Memon business concern. They were ruthlessly boycotted and constantly abused on the streets. The anger of the Saids convinced me that they were capable of having me killed. It was neither beyond them nor difficult for them. But I had moved too far and was committed to my rebellion. I'd actually like to thank Tehmina Durrani for forcing me to read this book. Thanks a lot. In the year 1951, I spent 2,300 rupees from my savings to buy an 8-foot square shop in Mitadar. Outside it, I put a small tin money box and called it the Memon Voluntary Corps. 10 Memon boys joined me, as I needed them only for government regulations. I simultaneously secured their resignations to curtail the danger of hidden enemy agents who could build a majority and remove me on the basis of the company's constitution. I had become overly cautious and suspicious. When we had 22 members, I dissolved the constitution and ended live memberships to protect the organization. The dispensary catered to everyone. Medicines were purchased at company rates and sold cheaper than the market. As doctors' fees were too high for the poor to pay, I hired a physician on a fixed salary. This not only gave an option for the public, it also fought the Memon community, as the doctor became an advertisement. News spread, and people began turning away from the hoax of the first dispensary. In the morning, I took up work at a doctor's clinic, as well as training in pharmacy and accountancy to save money for my organization. At the dispensary, I was confronted with all kinds of human problems. It especially pained me to see the condition of women, young, only a few years before they withered away. constant childbearing, and a man's physical needs required supernatural strength. Again, this is something that I'm adding to it. I mean, it's something that completely, it baffles me, confounds me, that the Islamic concept of having sex without protection, it's absolutely nonsense in terms of responsibilities. How could people still buy it? You see people with 10 children, women suffer, children suffer. Constant childbearing and a man's physical needs required supernatural strength. I observed how difficult it was for a woman to satisfy the sexual hunger of one man, and told my colleagues, by the time she's over with housework, childbearing and child rearing, her back is already broken, only to be re-broken by her husband's constant advances. My father used to say, when Islam recommends more than one wife, it emphasizes the inequality in gender energy. It is difficult for one woman to fulfill the responsibilities and duties of an entire household plus the physical needs of a husband. So you have one wife as housemaid and the other for sex. Change roles. Although Islam permits the taking of 4 wives simultaneously, poverty precludes the possibility, and only voluntary restraints, compassion and duty can resolve the issue. But there was no sign of control or prevention of legalized abuse, and marriage had become a health hazard. The dispensary was never shut, as I had my opposition to compete with. I was always in attendance, sitting outside it after the markets closed, and sleeping on the cement bench to serve those who came late at night. My mother continued to insist that I return home to eat and sleep. She was convinced that the bench was too hard for my back. Take a mattress and a pillow, keep it in the shop for the night. There was no space for that, and I would truthfully tell her I sleep very soundly on the bench, in fact more so. She would stare at me in amazement. At home there was not much talk about my work. In this silence, Aziz could not comprehend the kind of mind that was obsessed with self-imposed discomfort. Neither did he appreciate my conflict with the Saints. Although we moved in different directions, I believed that in time he would understand me better, and the bond of our mother's love and training would sustain a relationship of respect between us. The hostile environment and the trip to East Pakistan fueled a passion to travel. I was sure I would find new outlets by understanding the world beyond Pantwa and Karachi. In 1956, pursuing this dream, I decided to travel west by bus, not on foot as I had imagined. We drove through Iran, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria and Yugoslavia, and I was surprised that I faced no problems on the way. Immigration officers would check my passport and ticket, go through my pair of clothes, a coverlet, some money and food in my canvas bag. They would look at me slightly puzzled, put it all back and let me pass. Many people mistook me for a poor tramp. Everywhere I went, people were compassionate towards me, offering me food and giving me small change, which I saved for the dispensary. The effects of the Second World War were waning, and public consciousness in overcoming them was impressive. I would squat on the sidewalks in different countries and watch the human traffic. I noticed a haste in people's movements. They moved with lightning pace into a new era, as if they knew time as precious, fleeting, and uncertain. I compared our own attitude to theirs and felt despondent for Pakistan, where time seemed surplus and without end. None of the characteristics necessary for nation building were visible. I reflected on the blood spilt in the creation of a Muslim homeland. Now it lacked direction and leadership. The game the founder had won in the first round could be lost in the second. Apparently, definitely lost. Both sides, I suppose, both India and Pakistan. India may speak of incredible India, this is my opinion, but I think with the raging poverty there and the rapes and everything, there's nothing incredible about India. Pakistan, those who are Pakistanis know what the situation is at home. I thought deeply of our dilemma. Selfish pursuit of opportunities had diverted development from its natural course. Those who should have set a moral example had become preoccupied with self-promotion. Everybody became a notch above that they originally were. The confusion between their colonial pretensions and Muslim backgrounds warped the rulers, who in turn confused and retarded the public. Beautifully said. Absolutely, the absolute truth. The class system of Pakistan, the brown sahibs, intellectual and mental slaves of the English, who would rather criticize me for my accent or speed, but not realize that this is not my mother tongue that I speak in right now. Nobody criticizes a European for not speaking perfect English, German or French for that matter, but a Pakistani or an Indian is put straight into the witness box. Criticize, demean, for not pronouncing an English word perfectly. As early as that, I understood that as welfare was not even a consideration, Pakistan's prosperity was not a priority for them. Money was printed, businesses established, and a cycle of greed and exploitation came into frenzied operation. From the beginning, emphasis was on the creation of personalities. That's what we see today. Puttos and sharifs and whatnot, bloody personalities. This was followed by a rapid increase of a breed of people who hungered for admission into the corridors of influence and power. Preempted it. It was an open market without tax or control regulations. When sales tax was introduced for the purpose of revenue, shopkeepers sold a 1 rupee per yard fabric and billed it for 12 annas, weakening the fledgling revenue system in infancy. I wondered how we would pull through and felt for those who still dreamt of prosperity for the new country. In Europe it was different. My heart saddened for Pakistan, and I became increasingly convinced that the state was against itself. It was evident that we were moving in the direction of an unmanaged future, in which my own generation was fated either to be powerless or selfish. I concluded that the foundations of Pakistan could be fortified only by the leadership's long-term vision fused with the toil of the general public. Without emphatically pursuing this ideal, future generations would find themselves in quicksand. Or no sand. In Rome, I thanked sympathetic people who dropped money or left bits of food for me while I spent the night covered with a wrap on a bench at a railway station. Early next morning, I awoke to discover that my shoes had disappeared. In Pakistan, it would matter little, as many are barefoot, but here I would surely attract attention. Panic flitted away when I realized that in my subconscious state I had discovered somebody poorer than myself. The prosperity around me was not as deep as to take away the needs of all men. I walked around shoeless, refusing to spend money on a pair that would cost less in my own country. The next evening, an elderly lady gave me a pair of well-worn boots, two sizes larger than mine, and I wobbled about in them for the remainder of my journey. All the time I compared and reflected on the false eulogies I had heard of Muslim rulers. I realized that attitudes were instilled in us over centuries, and our history would continue to be painted in false terms until we lost all sense of reality. With these thoughts of disillusionment, I arrived by ferry on a £2 ticket at Dover and proceeded to Euston by bus. The British toll system fascinated me more than anything else I had seen during my travels. Public use of government facilities by the use of coin boxes was beneficial for both parties, as it removed the possibilities of temptation, greed, laziness, and cheating. I saw how welfare needs were being met in England and learned how to use them myself. Although I noted sections that seemed important, I was interested only in what could be implemented practically. When my host and friend from Bantwa, Siddiq Edhi, asked me to stay and work in London, offering to get me a job, I refused on the pretext, I have to do something for the people in Pakistan. The selfish ways that the best of us have taken has heightened my passion to serve them. A volcano is stirring inside me. I explained to my friend, the 5 basic tenets of Islam continue into the 6th for me, Hukuk al-Ibad, or humanitarianism. That it is not proclaimed as obligatory has deeper meaning. As right and wrong are left to human initiatives, its importance would be lost if forced. Hukuk al-Ibad, now, here is my opinion. Hukuk al-Ibad, I think, is the least understood aspect of Islam, and if it were understood, as Tehmina says, that there would be no terrorism, there will be no problem in the world that we live in today. And I think that's what it is. Beautifully said. I clarified this point. Within this tenet lies the essence of all religions and the test of all mankind. A universal unity is evident from it. All religions move in the same direction and towards the same goal, humanitarianism. All holy books hold the same meaning. No religion declares humanitarianism as obligatory, yet all stress upon it as the only acceptable way of life. In fact, we are different only by rituals formulated according to the terrain and temperament of people that prophets were sent to direct. My friend was surprised. You sound like a religious preacher. Are you becoming a mullah? I shook my head. He had not understood. At home, I had lost my job at the cloth shop and was immediately confronted with the reinforced resolve of the community to teach me a lesson. In my absence, I was accused of being a thief. And this was termed as the reason for my dismissal from the first dispensary. The allegation circulated throughout the area. Although I was disheartened by the false perceptions propaganda could create, I had already accepted that this would be ongoing. I had to confront it with a long-term resolve to win. What an exemplary life. My battle against the big sarmayadars commenced in earnest. Maimun boys began to gather around me as I expressed my anger against capitalists, their agents, and the different forms of exploitation they employed. Soon enough, I became an embarrassment for the bosses. I stripped off their garbs of false respect, their Monday flourishes by compounding the difficulties of the poor and cementing their problems into permanency. A few generations from now, these wealthy families will face the same issues. Duplicity and wrongdoing churn out natural destruction with the moving cycle of time. Soon, their children will fight amongst themselves and enter the same chucky or system that once crushed the deprived. Their fear of immediate loss keeps them from making changes that can protect and preserve their future. 2 years after setting up and establishing the dispensary, I changed the parochial name to Medina Voluntary Corps, and leaving my supporters in charge, went abroad again. The train journey from France to Turkey became an event. Many years had passed since my last thoughts of love and marriage. Now feelings for the opposite sex came to the fore again. She was Turkish and carried an infant in her arms. After putting her luggage down, they settled down beside me. She was fragile, with a creamy complexion, and had a remarkably good design. My father had always emphasized on that being of utmost importance to a long-term relationship. He had often advised me, if she's not of good design, good figure, I don't know what he means by that. Soon you will have many examples to compare her with and regret that you procured the wrong product. Look for long-term interest. A woman of good design mellows well with age. Despite the fact that neither of us understood the other's language, we made an effort to communicate, and by the time our journey was nearing its end, we had become familiar enough to joke. She searched for something in her bag. Not finding whatever it was she looked for, she spilt out its contents into the space between us and pulled out a little magnet. Pointing to my eye with her finger, she held up the magnet and giggled. I giggled back. The shape of my nose had not occurred to me until now. Not until she touched it with her fingertip and said it was Arab. I had a call to attend. Anyway, I blushed. She noticed and held her red shawl against my cheek. Was it the red of blood or the flush of love? I did not know which she meant. Perhaps it was energy. I never knew the romantic in Edhi. I never knew the fighter in him, from so many aspects. Again, thanks, Tehmina. Thank you. I'd never read this book had you not pushed me to. I had developed into a strong man with broad, powerful shoulders. Unlike my father, I was not tall, but my physique made me look big. She pointed to me and said, "You," pointing to herself, she said, "I," and clasping her hands together, she laughed and said, "Marriage." I was taken aback by her proposition and pretended not to comprehend the meaning of her actions. I had neither laughed nor talked with the woman before this. Now I became aware of my weakness and my weakness for beauty. I liked her big brown eyes and her ready smile. It was in fact her smile that was most attractive. A happy disposition was imperative to beauty. recalling and connecting broken pieces of English words, regretful that I had not studied as Aziz had advised. I racked my brains and came up with sit down, stand up, come, go, and bye-bye. Unfortunately, none were of any use. With much effort, the shaking of my head and the gesture of my hands, I tried to explain that as my wife, she would have to work with me. I could only marry a Pakistani girl. She was also prepared to do that. I knew it was impossible. We shared her chocolates, a taste I would memorize with her forever. She gave me her address and asked me to visit her. When we said farewell, I felt sad at losing her, but was sure that there was more to a marriage partnership than physical attraction. Language, culture, and traditions were important, especially as I did not have time to make myself understood at home. My passion for travel was satiated. I returned to Karachi with many new ideas for the running of my shop and told my Bantwa friends, one day I'll perform Hajj by road. This time they all nodded, sure that I would. Aziz graduated from high school and applied to college. Sometimes he became critical about my style of work, an attitude very foreign to our upbringing. I felt compassion towards Aziz and appreciated how frustrating my example must always have been for him. I could relate to that. Our father had said many times, if anyone is even half what my eldest son is, he will have a meaningful existence. Aziz could not comprehend this, and as I understood but little myself, I could not explain it. My brother was basically a quiet soul, but he had a short temper, avoiding which I remained away for long periods, returned with pangs of guilt and concern, my mother. The gross state of women in our society made me open a maternity unit for which I hired the room above the dispensary and advertised a nursing course. This new step was confronted with an attack on my character. Agents of women bosses were up in arms accusing me of establishing a place of ill repute, and stories about my thieving nature, loose models, and un-Islamic character began to circulate. This only strengthened my resolve and my stubborn nature. My father told me practical work should be your weapon. Nothing else can make them retreat from this battlefield. The competition increased my energy. I laughed at my Bantwa friends. I'm running in a race. It might be a marathon. Who do you think will win? Under the supervision of a lady doctor, I established a maternity unit, which was soon flooded with applications for training. As it was not common for women girls to either work outside their homes or beside men, the option of nursing immediately became popular. Those who did not come at first due to circulating rumors came when they saw their friends and acquaintances take up the course. We offered 150 rupees for a 3-month training course, following which the girls would be obliged to spend 3 months training new students. At the end of 6 months, they were free to take up employment elsewhere, ensuring us service and them economic independence. Beautiful idea. Delivery cases came at all hours of day and night. Energetic and clever girls learned the art of midwifery and were soon handling childbirths. Soon old people, destitute and sickly children began to squat outside our door. I lodged them under the thatched roof at the top of the building. The seriously ill were taken by volunteers to government hospitals. As there was no pressure of committees and boards, all decisions were my own. I hired and fired, searched for potential talent, dismissed lethargy, stupidity, slackness, and excuses. Everyone was petrified of me. People needed to be pulled up all the time, and I never faltered in that duty, expecting excellence, not perfection. The little money we collected from medicines was not enough, and the idea of selling animal hides flashed. We advertised for people to donate the skin of goats sacrificed for Eid, as the few rupees they fetched were not of any value to those who had the means to purchase a goat for sacrifice. People began to deposit skins at our doorsteps. We also purchased them at lower rates from wholesale meat sellers and sold them at higher prices. It soon became a lucrative business. The public was responding to a service that did not discriminate, and donations increased as zakat, sadaqah, and khairat began to pour in. These are Islamic terms for charity. Those who came regularly to the dispensary dropped whatever they could afford into the money box. In the meantime, while I struggled to break the communal monopoly on charity, my mother was feeling and looking weaker by the day. During the last 4 years, she had withered away to become a faint shadow of herself, and she had relinquished her position of authority. She hardly talked to us anymore. only mumbled to herself. Sometimes she cried inconsolably. At other times she laughed about nothing. I knew that the condition was related to her separation from her firstborn, what I spoke about in the first 2 chapters. Due to circumstances that controlled the intensity of the conflict, now her frail spirit failed to cope with the truth. The amount of injustices that women suffer. His mother was separated from her first husband's children when she got married to Edhi's father. She was reared by her sister. They were reared by her sister. During her illness, I was confronted with the amazing problem of transport. The ailing were provided nothing for mobility. The first time I had attempted to get an ambulance to take my mother to a hospital, I was told that there was only one in the entire city of Karachi. This belonged to the Red Cross and was not easily available. I had often taken her in a rickshaw. After putting her in and holding her tightly, I would jump in beside her, and the noisy, reckless machine would transport us. Qualified help was also unavailable, which was the reason I had begun the nursing home. Excuse me, I'm getting a call. So I have to call. Although the lady doctor suggested, and many girls offered, I had politely refused assistance for my mother. A neighbor rushed to the dispensary to inform me of my mother's collapse. The door was open. She had been sitting on the floor, cleaning her utensils, when some children saw her fall. By the time I reached her, she was gasping for breath. She had suffered a stroke that left half her body paralyzed. My father and brother were as upset as myself, but as neither could give up their work, I took the responsibility of looking after her. That I considered it my first duty to care for the woman who had borne and loved me was not important for my mother. Much as I explained that looking after her gave me happiness, she would reject it in an incoherent voice. Pray that God should free me from the service you do for me. It breaks my pride. I tried to pacify her, even scold her, but she always became inattentive and detached at such times. In the morning I fed and changed her, gave her medication and injections, then remained with her until she settled, returning early from the dispensary to relieve my father and prepare the evening meal. As early as the first few months of her illness, I realized that dependent women became more so with illness. For the poor, it was a nightmare. Family members had neither time nor money to spare. Sadly, an afflicted woman had nothing to give in return. Healthy people were too alive to become bonded to the life of the old and ailing. To expect more compassion from them was out of place. And yet my upbringing guided me towards my mother's bedside, so that soon, even for dispensary work, I was contacted at home. When it was time for my father to return, she would turn to look at the door and again. When it was time for Aziz to come home, once at such a time she spoke. What service am I for my family? I cannot contribute anything. My mother had lost her dignity. Paralysis is the most humiliating of conditions. It renders the victim incapable of existing without becoming a heavy burden on another human being. Joking about old times, I tried making her comfortable with my actions, cleaning her face and hands with a soaked cloth. Then with a damp one. Remember, you washed me like this when I was ill? As time passed, she became completely bedridden and could no longer be carried down to the bathroom. I brought a pail and tin tub to the room and carried her thin body to a low stool, supported her back with the wall to prevent her from falling. I would place 2 boxes at her side and pour warm water over her body, soaping her and pouring more water. After drying her, dressing her and putting her to bed, I cleaned the flooded room, thankful at our simplicity and lack of furniture. When she used the bedpan, I would wait outside the door, hopelessly trying to retain her privacy. She would turn her face away when I approached her bed again. Washing her was full of sadness. Her shameful eyes exposed more than her body. I would make other attempts. Do you remember how many times you washed me? You are my child now. I am your mother. Tears would roll down her cheeks. When she heard that, nothing I said made her accept the reverse condition. That pride and self-esteem are dependent on well-being over which there is no control was a frightening revelation. It brought me face to face with the problems of both the family and the sick. So much more went into an illness than medicine. Although when I was absent, my father was always with her, I wondered how much more or less other husbands would do. From Aziz and myself, I measured other sons and concluded that the ill were truly heavy burdens. The agents of big bosses continued to spread stories accusing me of corrupting the nation's daughters. The girls, however, kept coming. Practical work proved that the allegations were untrue. Those who worked with me spread their own version, holding their ears and shaking their heads at my demanding nature, strict discipline, and bad temper. This repetition successfully fought against the false one created by my enemies. My mother had been bedridden for over 2 years, in which time I had become accustomed to her care. She looked so helpless and innocent, so sad at keeping me, so ashamed at burdening me, that nothing I said changed her expression. The grieved look in her eyes always remained the same, and so my circumstances at home made me decide to marry. The search began at the nursing home. It was the only place to look, as I could not suffer lazy people. The woman I chose as my wife would foremost have to be an excellent worker. Her compassion and dedication could easily be assessed at Meet Others' testing ground. Yawn. As long as my actions did not conflict with my principles, I was not worried about enemies conjuring up more stories. I was confident enough to pursue any truth, and marriage was a right of every man. It signified respect, not insult. At this time, Amina, who was recently divorced with a son, had been with us longest. She was in charge of junior students at the maternity unit, and I had watched her work improve steadily. I noticed that she dealt with poor women and children with compassion. She was competent, intelligent, quick-witted, and had a confident manner. She also had the good design my father always emphasized, with a fair skin that complemented dark, energetic eyes. With some encouragement from me, she was able to break the barrier that my temperament created between the staff and myself. Soon, she began to keep me informed about other people's errors. One day I summoned her to the office and asked her to sit before my desk. She obeyed, but I lost my confidence. Suddenly, it seemed too abrupt. I need to make some ground before raising the sensitive issue of marriage and refrained from discussing it yet. During working hours, I began to make light-hearted conversation with her, much to the surprise of everyone else. I tried to catch her attention at a time when I was cool-tempered and she alone, but I was still unable to propose. Not until finally I told myself, what kind of a man are you that you cannot face the ordinary issue of marriage? The majority of the men the world over are married. How difficult can such a common act be? So I summoned her again and sat her down. This time I said pointedly, will you marry me? She, I must confess, had no such idea. In her mind, in fact, her shock was so visible that I wished I could reverse time and erase our embarrassment. Amina laughed nervously, looking down, playing with her hands, mumbling something about speaking to her mother. After that, I avoided her until many days later. I thought she must surely have obtained an answer by now. Why had she not given me a reply? Perhaps she was shy. Perhaps she wanted to stall. I worried that it might be refusal. Maybe she wanted to forget it was ever mentioned. With this and other dilemmas, I approached her again. Right. So, she avoided looking at me and said that her mother disapproved. Then looked up. Sharply she explained, what do you have to give me? How will you keep me? When you're not with your mother, you sleep outside on the bench. I understood that she herself was not in favor of the proposal. Aziz had taken admission in a law college, and I was proud of him. He had also met a girl and fallen in love. I'm fasting today, although it's the month of fasting. I was feeling a little unhinged this morning. And I don't wake up to 2 black coffees as some people do when they are unhinged. So, right. Aziz, right. He'd also met a girl and fallen in love. Our father had always encouraged us towards making our own choices of life partner, and had often advised marriage could not be successful if it be based on any mindset other than your own. Sounds logical, but many of the people in Pakistan don't practice it. Our parents' liberal views were unusual in our community and in those times, even in these times. My father would say, Our family's progressive thinking comes from our ancestors. They were gifted with open minds in closed times. She avoided looking at me when she said her mother disapproved. Then, looking up sharply, she explained, what do you have to give? So anyway, Aziz had taken admission to law college and I was proud of him. He had also met a girl and fallen in love. Our father had always encouraged us to Rada. I had read this out too. Father was pleased with Aziz's decision and gave his blessings. Mother was in no position to give an opinion of the necessary. Reem, I said don't make any sounds. Excuse me. Father was pleased with Aziz's decision and gave his blessings. Mother was in no position to give an opinion. I looked him up and down, wondering secretly what it needed to make a girl consent. If Aziz was the example, I had none of the necessary attributes. He spoke English, had no beard, and dressed like a modern young man. His shoes were always brightly polished. I had watched Aziz spit upon the leather and shine them with feather-light strokes. In stark comparison, my only pair of slippers highlighted my shabby appearance. The tradition of wearing beards had not existed before partition, when out of 100, only 2 or 3 people wore them. Now one could see many. Because of my beard, many people referred to me as Maulana or Islamic cleric. Whereas my flowing beard was in the spirit and tradition of revolutionaries, I dispelled disturbing thoughts of changing my appearance for the purpose of marriage, and was sure that the direction of my life would not permit it to alter. My wife would have to become part of the same direction. That seemed far-fetched, and a hopelessness overwhelmed me. There might, after all, be no wife for me. Aziz was married at a simple ceremony in the mosque. He brought Zora, a sweet and caring girl, home to meet our paralyzed mother before they shifted to a room opposite our building. On the other hand, I proposed to 7 other girls in a period of 2 years. Each refused on the pretext that I was either too poor or too strict or too religious or too much of a miser. For the last attitude, I was known the most. Not a paisa could be extracted from me unless verified, signed and accounted for. Only on my mother's treatment did I spend without fuss. I decided not to pursue the idea of marriage and rush it to a compromise conclusion. The constant refusals indicated the control of fate over my impulsiveness. In the meantime, mother had become skin and bones and was so light now that when I carried her to the low stool for bathing, I wondered if she even breathed. The time came when she was too weak to sit on the stool, when I would only sponge her. When she needed a head wash, I gently pulled her high on the charpoy, let her thin strands of hair down, lathered and rinsed them over the tin tub with water from the bucket. At first, I had found it difficult to comb long hair, but soon got used to that. Braiding it was another matter. I rolled it around in every conceivable way, yet it never looked right. When I cleaned the room, she focused her eyes on me, following my every move. Although I maintained everything the way she had, exactly by her own standards, she sensed her home was falling apart. I tried to prevent it happening before her eyes. Her life had ended many years ago. I had watched her slowly fade away, more because of indignity than pain. The last few months she had looked at the room and at us with an anxiety that raced to rekindle every memory in her spirit. She was not very old, yet she had aged beyond time. Under her breath she said Allahu. Other than that, she said nothing. I would cradle her head in my arms and rock her gently, saying, "Remember how you used to rock me to sleep when I was small?" My smile would fade when her eyes would fill. I loved her like a mother loves a child and mourned her loss much before it came. One morning she had a brain hemorrhage and went into a coma. 5 days later she died. We did not believe in dramatic events and carried her quietly on a charpoy to the graveyard. After she was laid to rest and covered with earth, I turned away, leaving my father and brother behind. There was no longer any reason to return home. I walked towards the dispensary. It was over. She had gone. I could no longer contain the lump in my throat. I locked and bolted the windows and doors and cried bitterly. The past turned into heartache. The little errands, the packets for charity, those cutting remarks at unshared money, the soft breath blown with her prayer came back. She had given me in abundance until the very end. I recalled those moments spent by her bedside, at last allowing myself to acknowledge her torment at being my dependent. Her eyes always imploring me to return to work, never to stay. I had witnessed a battle between dignity and degradation. Dignity had lost. Even from that, she left me an inheritance worth many fortunes. Without realizing, she gave me an opportunity to return some of my debt to her through herself. She took me into a world of misery, selfishness, and ingratitude. She had been alone despite a loving husband and 2 sons, uncomfortable despite financial support. As a child, she taught me charity. Now she taught me collective social welfare. She opened doors that allowed me to experience the numerous difficulties faced by the people. Its lessons were cruel. Its reality was. Her life, her illness, and her loss were an education full of tests and examinations. The pain was practical. It was not an illusion, not a dream. As in any other subject, fighting reality requires knowledge and personal experience. I thought of how bewildered I had been with her condition, how helpless and fatigued I had become, how little I knew. Driven by her example and experience, a passion to change the world was born. She had signed my heart with a burning desire to care for humanity, the way I had done for her. In respect for charity, she had, unknowingly or perhaps knowingly, bequeathed me to it. From here, there was only one way to go. The first night she spent in her grave, I dedicated my life to the service of mankind. So with this, ladies and gentlemen, I finish chapter 3 of Mirror to the Blind, a book on Abdus Sattar Edhi's life until 1995, transcribed by Tehmina Durrani. I would like to thank Tehmina profusely for the umpteenth time forcing me to read this book. I could see a lot of things in common between the Sattar Edhi's life and my life. I am sure you, the listeners, would find something in common too, and if you don't, then you really are very unfortunate, because what he experienced and what he stood for, just one word: the truth. That's all there was to Sattar Edhi's life. That's all there is to my life. That's all there is to Tehmina Durrani's life. That's all there is to any good human being's life. Stand up for the truth. That is not easy. It has its costs. As Abdus Sattar Edhi spoke of rejection in the hands of the otherwise very honest and sincere and upright Memon community, where he was made the object of ridicule and contempt and hate. So I'll leave you with this, and watch out for chapter 4. Have a good day or evening. Bye.